Well, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard says she has identified, quote, overwhelming evidence to show how Obama-era officials manufactured the Trump-Russia collusion hoax after he was elected in 2016. Here is DNI Gabbard on what she found.
Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office, after President Trump had already gotten elected. Creating this piece of manufactured intelligence that claims that Russia had helped Donald Trump get elected contradicted every other assessment that had been made previously in the months leading up to the election that said exactly the opposite. So the effect of what President Obama and his senior national security team did was subvert the will of the American people, undermining our democratic republic, and enacting what would be essentially a years-long coup against President Trump, who was duly elected by the American people.
Nicole, Congressman Pat Fallon told me last hour, Republican congressman, that if there was something that was law-breaking here, that there should be accountability because this is so problematic. And he seems to think he couldn't release everything that he's already seen. Well, no one can at this point, but he said as this becomes more public, you'll see what I'm talking about.
And I agree with him 100% because, again, if you broke the law, if they actually did participate in this, I do believe in accountability. And I do believe that there should be tangible consequences for this type of behavior, because what this does is it's not just the crime that was committed allegedly. It's that you destroy the trust of these intel agencies, of these law enforcement agencies, the CIA, the FBI, all of these agencies involved in that. And again, I was at the FBI in 2016, and I can tell you that this was the first time that I really felt, wow, the FBI has been politicized. And I was down in FBI Miami. Oh, yeah. It was a very July 5th of 2016 when Jim Comey came out and said no reasonable prosecutor will charge Hillary Clinton. I will never forget that moment. And I'm down in FBI Miami working violent crime. Literally, the next day, I was given a case of a child who had been raped by her biological father. And we're trying to work real cases in Miami. In the meantime, we're hearing about this nonsense going on in D.C., just trying to ignore it. We're like, look, that's not our problem. That's the political side of things. So again, going back to the original point, I do believe that there should be consequences, because not only does it destroy the trust of the American people, it destroyed the trust of FBI agents. We're like, what is going on in my agency? This is my director. Can I trust my FBI director? And I can tell you that the FBI has never recovered since, in my opinion, because of the destructive behavior of James Comey and others that may have been involved, Brennan, Clapper, others in the intel agencies. And, you know, let's let them see what they've got. They've given the information to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Kash Patel. Let them follow the evidence. If a crime was committed, you know what they always say? No one is above the law. And you know what? You're not either. And so let's see what happens. Follow the evidence.
There you go, Griff.
Well, look, I think that to Nicole's point, accountability is the goal of this. And over the weekend, we interviewed on Fox and Friends Tulsi Gabbard as well on Saturday, and it struck me that she's making the case that, look, this is a manipulated and politicized effort to change the narrative, to usurp Donald Trump's election, and that every American across bipartisan lines should care about accountability. And she said that ultimately that accountability goes all the way to the top, to former President Barack Obama. Now, I think to Cheryl's point, does this lead to actual charges? I don't know. I do think, Harris, one thing that might be in the cards to come down the pike is some congressional hearings in seeing people like Comey, like Brennan, like Clapper, like Susan Rice being called before Congress, because you would think that if there are, quote, charges brought, it's because of statements they made that were inconsistent with what was actually done according to these documents.
Yeah. Can they plead the fifth, like what we've seen here recently?
We saw an awful lot of that out of the inner circle to Biden's aides.
I don't know how much more you'll get. You know, I guess my kind of top-down concern has to do with how far back this went if ex-President Obama was involved. I mean, they would have been working against Donald Trump to help Hillary win, to what else? What could have been the reason for all of that?
Because they wanted to stay in control, and Donald Trump was operating so far outside the establishment that I think to a lot of people whom many would consider the deep state, he was uncontrollable. He was such an unknown quantity that they were terrified that he would come in and upend the establishment. And, you know, it's like in many ways he has. In many ways he has destroyed a lot of norms that people didn't realize were detrimental to this country.
Wow. You have a last quick word.
Well, I was going to say that there's a great piece this morning in the opinion section, foxnews.com, written by our colleague Greg Jarrett, who wrote a book about all of this. And he goes through a lot of the reasons why the legal bar might be really high. So let's see what the DOJ comes up with. But he does kind of lay out the case of where this could or could not go, depending on what the law is.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.